Okay, I think we are live. Yep, the ticker is on. So we're really recording this because um, I'm here with Wayne from Spain. I call him Wayne Chasan. He's actually an American guy, but lives in the south of Spain. Wayne is, we met kind of virtually and hit it off pretty quickly between photographers talking photography. We wanted to share a little bit with everybody else. So, hi Wayne.
Hi Ron. Hi everyone.
So like I said, we've been talking about photography, just doing that. Maybe the excuse is quarantine, having time to talk on Skype and stuff. But we started getting into some stories, and we thought we should share some stories because Wayne is a fantastic photographer in Spain and in Europe, and the work itself is fantastic. Then I start talking to him, and he has this great personality. Then we start talking about how some of those solutions to difficulties has been pulling out that tool of HDR and bracketing and photomatics. So I thought we need to share this with the photomatics page. So that's what we're doing here. And besides that, I think Wayne Chasan, you should take it away and tell people more about you. And we're just our plan is to probably share one story, and then that's about it for today. Just do it kind of quick in and out. So
perfect, fantastic.
Tell us more about you.
Well, Ron and I, of course, started talking as photographers do, and we can go on forever. And much to the frustration of any non-photographer in the neighborhood, we had some great stories, and we were talking about. I've been working. I moved to Spain in 1982 and became a photographer here. I've been involved in video and film industry in California. I'm basically a Californian at heart and Spanish at heart. I was born elsewhere, but that's where I've lived most of my life. And I've been working here, specialized in architecture and interiors for almost 40 years. And we were talking about how in the old days of analog, working with my Mamiya 6.7 and all the rest of the gear, we didn't have these solutions that you have now. I mean, there are a lot of things that didn't exist. It was a whole different workflow. So I started talking about, how I resolved the shot. Nowadays, I wouldn't have blinked twice. I just would have brought it into Photomatics, and I would have taken darker and brighter exposes and fixed it. And in fact, the shot, if I'd planned it properly, would have had nice light on it, and it would have worked on its own. But in this particular case, I took someone's word for the right time, and when I got there, it was a disaster. So we kind of thought we'd show that picture and tell the story behind it, and then kind of segue into how, now with Photomatics, we resolve these things easier ways. So this is kind of a crazy story. I was doing it with for a big client of mine who had a chain of restaurants. They wanted to do all this Spanish food set up on the beach, waterfront. And the graphic designer who I'd worked with a lot said, "Hey, this is an afternoon shot. You don't need to come do pre-production." And I guess I was foolish, and I didn't. So I got there, and the kitchen had been cooking for hours, and they'd set this up on the beach on these, supports and pieces of wood, and they were ready to go. And I said, "The only angle to the sea is looking straight into the sun. It's absolutely backlit. I have no lighting with me, just a reflector, because back in those days there were no battery-operated strobes, and this was way out on the beach."
For those of us that really miss traveling, which ocean are we looking at?
Yeah, so we're looking at the Mediterranean Ocean. This is Marbella, Spain, southern coast of Spain, about 40 minutes away from Gibraltar and the Straits of Gibraltar, if that rings a bell. And so how did we get this beautiful shot with this backlit food? Well, I tilted the plates so the sunlight would just skim them. We're working with a Mamiya 6.7 set up on tripod. I used just about every neutral density graduated filter that I had to get about 10 stops or 8 stops of difference between the sunset sky and the food. And as I only had one reflector with me, I said to the cooks who were there, all concerned about how we were going to get this shot nicely, I said, "You guys have tinfoil, right? You have?" And they said, "Yeah." I said, "Go wrap tinfoil around any piece of cardboard or piece of wood or anything that you have and bring them here. We're going to make reflectors." So I had all these guys standing around with these makeshift reflectors. these filters, and then we waited for the sun just to move off to the right so it was out of frame and blocked it so it wouldn't create a lens flare, and that was the shot. Now, nowadays, you'd leave the sun in the shot, you'd take a bunch of brackets, you'd throw it into Photomatics, and that would be the end of it. But we got a really unusual, cool shot out of it. I have to say, one thing I learned from this is just doing things the easy way where it works makes it a little more predictable in the results as well. So sometimes it's good to run into a challenge or do things differently to get a different result.
You came up with a good result there by
Yeah.
doing those last minute creative solutions though too.
It was a bit of a panic.
Now, did you get the chefs with the white coats in there to reflect using the white coats?
Yeah. I had like a chef and the restaurant owner and my assistant and probably the graphic design lady, all standing there holding reflectors, and everyone was freaking out because when I got there, I was just like, this is the wrong time. How do we deal with this? And we cooked it. I mean, there's been times when I've taken aluminum metal tables and turned them on their sides to turn them into reflectors. You use what you got.
That's a good idea.
I'm high tech and low tech. I'll use high tech stuff, but I love it when I find a low tech solution to something.
Could you get two reflectors, because you could take the tablecloth off the table and use the white tablecloth for one, and then
it wasn't the sun was actually kind of weak. It was already heading down, and it was kind of weak. A white cloth wasn't really doing much. We needed that shiny metallic thing to have any kind of an effect.
Very cool.
Really.
So that's one of the old
6.7 Fuji slide. This is the old pre-Photomatic solution. Now this is carrying on with that concept, an interesting one, because I was photographed to hire the same space twice over a period of many years. The first time I photographed it, I was still on film. This is again Mamiya 6.7, equivalent of a 24mm lens. It was a restaurant. They wanted it. They wanted to see the sea view. It couldn't be shot at night because the restaurant was open every day of the week, and nighttime, twilight time, was when clients were already there. They wouldn't shut it down for me.
And what year would you say this was?
Well, I think we're talking about 1990s. 1990s. I could look it up by the job number, but I don't have that in front of me right now.
That's okay. That just gives us a good idea.
Yeah,
of
it gives a range.
Of technology you were able to use.
So I had to use every single light I owned because there were no rental houses here. I set up probably 3 strobes inside this very high ceiling space, but I also had to set up strobes outside because it was a covered terrace, and the outside tables were going black if I didn't light them as well. And you can see here that, we're talking also kind of like an octagonal shaped room. So there was no way to get rid of, I got rid of almost every reflection in the glass except for this one here. So that took me 3 hours of work to do this massive lighting job, and then a fog rolled in and killed the sea view. So we actually ate because it was late and we hadn't eaten anything, waited for the fog to go away, and then shot it when the fog was gone. And then by that time the sun was in front, so that blue sky was white sky, because the sun was right there, and we had to use one of the shots that we'd taken, during the progress before the fog rolled in. So where am I going with all this? This shot took me hours to produce, one of the longest shots I've ever taken to produce. I'm normally much faster than that. And years later, I got hired to shoot the same hotel again, and this time I had just gone digital, and twilight was minutes before the restaurant opened. So we were able to capture the same space at twilight in 10 minutes. So this was the comparison. It's like hours of lighting versus being able to be there at the right time to keep an inside-outside balance. And I actually got there at the tail end of a bunch of other shots. So I got there right on the nose to catch the color outside before it went black. And all I had time to do, because I wasn't thrilled with the lighting, was grab 2 lamps that were off to the left and right sides out of frame and put them on the ground behind those 2 foreground tables, pointing at the center table in the middle there.
And so that was enough? Wow.
I have two like 60-watt lamps with the lampshades on because I couldn't get them off, just on the ground, hiding the cables behind the chairs, pointing at that.
Wow, and that was enough. To throw all the way
there. 10 minutes we got the shot, because we didn't have more time because the sky was going to go black. We'd lose the sea and sky and all that. Now, an interesting thing is you know, 30 minutes before going on the air right now, I said, you know, this is a really old digital shot. It was one of my first jobs. Was it actually photomatics? Because nowadays it's just part of my process. I always bracket, and I almost always do a photomatics version for the final result. And in fact, at Twilight, I find it's really easy because I almost always exclusively work in the natural mode and play with the 3 sliders. And I know that at nighttime, my 3 sliders are basically set at 10, 10, and 10, with 1 on the local contrast. And that almost always gives me a really good result right from the start. So I went to look at the original files, and I discovered that this shot was out of camera, no HDR, and no adjustments, because it looked nice. So I looked at the RAWs, and I found a dark and bright RAW still there, thank God, even though I hadn't used them, because I do trash. You know, at some point I go back and trash stuff that I haven't used if I think it's useless and repetitive. I tend to shoot a lot, so I don't want to. And I made a new version today, and this is, we're looking at 2007, 2 years into digital, not much idea of what the heck I was doing.
The first one from the 90s, the second one 10
2007,
years.
yeah, yeah. And here comes today's revamped version.
And this is the one you did in a few minutes between the time.
30 minutes before we went on live, I went, holy cow, why don't we see if we can make a Photomatics version if there's dark, bright files. And so
this was, sorry, I was just going to say, this was between the time we talked about doing this talk and doing the talk is when you did that.
Literally. And it was only because I went to look to see if it actually was a Photomatics processed shot, which I assumed it was, and I realized it wasn't. I just got it at the right time. It didn't really need it. It looked good. And then I looked through the rejects and found the dark and bright ones and threw this together. So differences. I actually did a white balance control on the tabletops here. I used this point of reference here. Okay. And
I feel like it has a modern look, and the one of the reasons is that the colors you nailed it. That the colors are the way we want them to be.
I think this is more how I would do it nowadays. It's probably more realistic as to the true colors. But of course, when I saw the original at the time, and not really knowing what I was doing in the digital world, and I don't even know if Photomatics existed in 2007. I'm not sure I had it in my workflow yet. I don't know if it was there.
It was young.
Yeah, you know, it just looked good to me, and I mean, I have to admit, when I did this one, I went, you know, I kind of missed the warmth of the old shot, but I love this electric blue outside and the cleanliness inside. And I also ran it through a lens distortion correction. And that's what we got. And boy, did I have fun.
I just wanted to, like I said, I don't want to keep people here all the time. I just wanted to point out that this is one of the things I've been talking about lately when I talk about HDR, which I do all the time, is that it doesn't have to be something you're using so constantly. And I just like the illustration you brought up, that you use it a lot, but you don't use it for everything. In fact, you thought that was a solution back then, but turned out it wasn't. So the point is that it shows up to save the day from time to time when you need that tool in the toolbox. Because I just have a lot of people saying, like, thinking that HDR is a style or a look, and it's not. It's a tool to me anyway. And I just wanted to kind of reiterate that point, and also really quickly, is there a trend, or is it just me, of doing more shots at dusk of interiors, with the dusk meaning you get that nice blue look outside? Some of the real estate stuff we've been doing with Rob Morodo on these talks, he likes to do the dusk interiors as well as the exteriors. Is that a trend, or is that just me noticing that?
For me, it's always been there, and it's one of my favorite times of day. But let me tell you why I almost always do a twilight session, even on small jobs. It resolves issues that during the daytime would take a lot more work, lighting, or post-production to achieve. So when you have very large spaces, or color balance issues, as you say, or a place that just needs to look more glamorous, if you leave those for the twilight shots, you simplify your shoot so much. You know, leave those problem shots for twilight when they're just going to be glamorous in 5 minutes.
And are you talking about the difference in the
inside-outside balance?
But you're talking about like the exposure, the difference in exposure, the contrast, or the colors, or both?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. If you get that right time, just like shooting say your classic out exterior of a hotel or a house, you get that just that right moment where it all
Yeah.
balances out. So so this is becoming a trend for the interior. Of course, on an interior, I guess you were doing like a high end job where you had, in the case of the first time you did that, all day to set it up and get one shot.
No,
Where
the first one, yes,
the
that
first
actually
one,
was, yeah.
but now
Half a
that's
day.
a besides the time waiting, it just takes a moment to get that shot.
I've never kind of worked that way. I tend to do like a full day and crush it, running around chasing the light. But in this case, that shot had to be lit so intensively that I just said, this is going to be a half-day shoot dedicated to this,
Yeah.
and that's where it went.
When I describe HDR, I think of this kind of a shot where it's all day setting up the lights.
I like to say exposure fusion. I actually don't want my shots to look like what people think of when they hear HDR. And I
Yeah.
prefer to say exposure fusion because it's more a tool, a means to achieve the same look I would have gotten with other methods.
Yeah, I have to admit that HDR is a term that's taken on its own meanings,
Yeah.
and those meanings are not correct in any technical way. And so I know I agree with you. And in fact, to push that a little bit more, using exposure fusion as the process, and we're talking about the terminology used for photomatics, and it gets used, that terminology of fusion gets used other places too, it's an easier way to get directly to those realistic results without too much experience, too much detail. But hey, great, good story. Thank you.
Been a pleasure.
It's good to share. I hope we can do some more of these because there were already other stories that I got to hear that I would love to pass on to other people. But real quick, since we're doing this in a public way, let me do that classic. This is Wayne Chasan. You can go to that great URL. You got in early, apparently, and got
I did. My family was very surprised. You got that? Why didn't we think of that?
I was not early enough to get pepper.com, but I got my own pepper. And then you are getting pretty active on Instagram, correct?
Yeah, yeah. Instagram is a little more personal, less commercial, more things that catch my eye, my iPhone, and I've got a new project that's going to launch soon. So people stay tuned in there next week, or
Cool.
the one after that will be cool.
And I'll copy paste this one into the comments just because it's harder to use, but I'll put this in the comments for anybody later on that wants to check out. These are just all the various places to find you, yeah?
Yeah, well, you've got my music. I did an album. You've got my website. You've got articles on me, making of videos. It's all there.
Cool. And if you want to ask questions about HDR, either I can see them or other social media people. We'll get Wayne involved maybe in our Facebook group. Check it out. It's not really new anymore. It's getting popular now. So yeah, come on and try that out. And let's just say thanks, and we'll talk again.
Pleasure.
Everybody.
Great pleasure.
Adios.
Ciao, buddies.